The prestigious Velaman family is known as the empire's premier noble house. They are renowned by the terrifying epithet the iron-blooded ducal house. But behind these grand walls, absolute chaos is a daily occurrence. Lucella walks into a room and is completely shocked by the flower-covered disaster. She spots her tiny nephew, Lucian, sitting right in the middle of the mess. Before she can even yell, the little menace beams and sprints right into her arms. She tries to stay stern and scold him for wrecking the place. But his weaponized cuteness shatters her defenses, and she actually ends up apologizing to him. Realizing she's the one saying sorry, she snaps back to reality. She points out that the entire floor is absolutely caked in white flour. Lucian ignores her scolding and begs his auntie to play with the slippery dough too. Meanwhile, the poor maids look like their very souls have been sucked out by this kid's endless energy. To save the servant's sanity, Lucella decides to take the child outside for a bit. But she instantly steps on a stray toy nutcracker and goes flying. She falls flat on her back, completely wiping out on the hard floor. And instead of helping, this little gremlin just laughs his head off. As she lies there, her life flashes before her eyes, taking her back 12 years. After their parents passed away, her uncle ruthlessly seized their family title. He then forcibly married her older sister off to the cold, distant Duke of Velaman. Worried for Lucella, her sister begged the Duke to let her move into the estate too. And that's how the two sisters ended up relying entirely on each other in this hostile home. A few years later, her sister gave birth to the incredibly adorable Lucian. But tragically, she fell ill, using her dying breath to beg Lucella to keep the boy by her side. Finding the tiny, neglected child crying alone in the hallway, Lucella couldn't bring herself to leave him behind. She vowed to stay in the Duke's house and raise him herself, since his own father completely ignored him. Snapping back to the present, Lucella loses consciousness after slipping on the toy. But as she listens to him giggle like a little villain, a crazy memory unlocks in her brain. She suddenly recalls her past life. She's actually reincarnated as a side character inside a fantasy romance novel. The main character is Edwin, the bastard child who eventually takes over the family. And worse, her precious nephew isn't the hero. He's the ultimate villain who torments Edwin daily. Driven mad by his father's neglect, Lucian grows up twisted and cruel. His obsession eventually leads him down a dark path straight to his own ruin. Lucella wakes up in bed, panicking over this horrible revelation. Accepting that she's stuck in this book is one thing, but realizing her cute nephew is destined to die horribly is too much to handle. Just then, she spots the future mastermind nervously waiting by the grandfather clock. He's clutching a teddy bear, tearfully apologizing because he didn't mean to hurt her. He rushes in for a massive hug, begging his auntie not to be sick. Her heart completely melts, and she promises to keep her vow to protect him. She realizes his awful pranks, like painting the maids' uniforms, are just desperate cries for attention. In the original story, the burden of raising him broke Lucella, and she fled the estate. That abandonment was the final straw that left him completely alone in the world. But this time, she resolves to stay and raise him properly so he never becomes a villain. Her first test of childcare comes when she takes a sip of the tea he brought her. She instantly gags. It tastes like straight ocean water. He proudly announces he filled it with salt so she can defeat bad guys with it. Normally, she'd fall for his cute face and let it slide, but she firmly puts her foot down. She tells him this isn't proper behavior and he needs to learn some manners. When he whines that bullying others is fun, she patiently explains that he shouldn't have fun if it makes other people uncomfortable. She gently pulls him into her arms. She asks him to endure these strict rules, believing he can truly change. He promises to try, and she proudly thinks she's already fixing him. But unfortunately, that hope doesn't even last a single day. The very next morning, she storms through the halls screaming his name. She finds him by the door and is immediately left speechless. He proudly shows off his new look, asking if it suits him. She loses her mind because he caused major trouble again. He literally chopped off a visiting count's prized beard just to make himself look cooler. Lucella realizes his possessiveness is already wild, and if she's not careful, he'll go completely off the rails just to keep her attention. Realizing her tiny nephew desperately needs to interact with kids his own age, Lucella hatches a plan. She firmly tells Lucian to stay home and reflect on his bad behavior. The little menace immediately panics, grabbing her dress and begging her not to leave. Looking up with massive puppy dog eyes, he desperately asks when she's coming back. She promises to return quickly, leaving the super clingy kid behind. Her true destination is the Busnier orphanage, where Edwin, the original protagonist of the novel, currently lives. She plans to leave a stellar impression on the future male lead now, hoping to protect Lucian from his wrath later. As her fancy carriage rolls up, the orphans peek out the windows in absolute awe. But the second Lucella steps inside, she is completely horrified. The place is an absolute dump, and the tiny children are on their hands and knees scrubbing the filthy floors. A chubby orphanage caretaker nervously lies, claiming the kids just insist on cleaning. Then the greasy, well-fed director steps up, eager to kiss up to a wealthy noble looking to adopt. He talks about the kids like they're literal products on a shelf, making Lucella internally rage. Suddenly, she spots a mop of silver hair and striking red eyes hiding in the shadows. There's no doubt about it, it's Edwin. He's the illegitimate child of the Duke, currently living a harsh life before claiming his massive title. She steps forward to politely introduce herself to the terrified boy. But he violently flinches and completely bolts out of the room. Playing it cool, Lucella tells the greedy director she wants to spend some time getting to know the kids first. She totally crashes their lunch, cheerfully sitting right at the table with the orphans. The director starts sweating bullets, desperately trying to get her to leave the dining hall. And it makes sense why. The toys are covered in mouse urine and the conditions are totally wrecked. It's glaringly obvious they only feed and dress the kids who have a high chance of getting adopted. Suddenly, a blonde girl speaks up, flatly asking if they look pitiful to her. She stares Lucella dead in the eye and coldly tells her not to pity them so casually. Lucella freezes, realizing this isn't just some random sassy orphan. This is Amelia Agris, the original novel's female lead. After losing her parents in a tragic carriage accident, a traumatized Amelia wandered off and ended up in this wretched place. Now she fiercely protects the other kids, including Edwin, under her tiny wings. Knowing Amelia will eventually become a total powerhouse, Lucella instantly tries to secure some friendship points. But when she acts nice, Amelia just gets super suspicious. Trying to scare the noble away, Amelia blatantly lies, claiming her dad was a serial killer and that she's got bad blood. Lucella immediately sees right through the bluff. Amelia is vilifying herself so she doesn't get adopted before her real family can find her. Lucella's heart breaks realizing this 7-year-old is using the only defense mechanism she has. Instead of running away, Lucella gently tells her that a child isn't defined by their parents' sins. She then cheerfully offers to share her bread with the hungry kids. Amelia is left completely stunned by this genuinely kind and incredibly strange noble lady. Later, Lucella sits down in the director's ridiculously lavish private office. Seeing she hasn't picked a kid, the slimy director subtly asks for a fat donation instead. Lucella glares around the room, disgusted that his office looks like a palace while the kids sleep in a collapsing shed. She calmly sets down her teacup, dropping her sweet act entirely. She stands up and informs the sweating man that she actually isn't here to adopt anyone. She formally introduces herself as an inspector for Duke Velaman. And she pulls out his fraudulent operational reports, ready to absolutely destroy this corrupt director. The sweaty director starts panicking as Lucella questions how this literal dump managed to secure a grade 1 rating. She points straight at the completely shattered windows and the broken garbage toys scattered on the floor. When she calls him out on the 20 gold pieces he supposedly spent on repairs, the slimy guy desperately blames the winter winds. Not buying a single word of his excuses, she demands to see the kitchen and the food supplies next. Meanwhile, little Amelia sneaks into the dark kitchen, desperately looking for something to feed Edwin. She manages to find a cookie, but her heart sinks when she sees it's already been gnawed on by mice. Suddenly hearing footsteps approaching, she quickly ducks into a nearby cabinet to hide. Lucella kicks the kitchen doors open and is absolutely horrified by the filthy, foul-smelling room. She picks up a rotting, unpeeled potato, disgusted that this scumbag considers this appropriate food for children. Completely busted, the terrified director drops to his knees, bowing and begging for mercy like a coward. But Lucella hits him with a brutal ultimatum: if he eats the rotting tomato, she might reconsider. As Amelia watches in shock from inside the cabinet, the greasy director takes a bite and instantly starts gagging. Unfazed by his suffering, Lucella coldly banishes him and all his staff to their quarters to await their official punishment. Amelia steps out of hiding, a wide smile on her face because the wicked director finally got wrecked. Looking up at Lucella, the young girl realizes this is the very first time an adult has genuinely worried about their well-being. By that evening, the public security officers arrive, dragging the corrupt staff away in ropes on charges of child abuse. Lucella immediately brings in her own maids to scrub the place top to bottom and completely restock the pantry. But as the newly saved kids gather around her in awe, reality hits her like a truck. She got rid of the bad guys, but now there's absolutely no one left to take care of all these children. Left with no other options, she decides to use her late sister's inheritance to fund the orphanage. Looking closely at little Edwin, the boy who will eventually become the powerful head of the family, she knows her sister would be happy to help him. She cheerfully turns to the kids, announcing that she'll be their temporary caretaker until a new teacher arrives. The orphans absolutely lose their minds, throwing their hands up and cheering for their favorite big sister. Sending her maids back to the Duke's estate, she prepares to brave the long night completely alone. Remembering the absolute chaos of trying to force her hyperactive nephew Lucian to sleep, she braces herself for a total nightmare. But to her shock, she walks into the bedroom to find all the kids already fast asleep in their fresh, clean beds. Only Amelia is awake, sitting up to watch over the younger ones. The poor girl explains that the old teachers would fiercely scold them if they didn't sleep early, so the survival habit just stuck. Her heart aching for the traumatized girl, Lucella sits down and offers to read her a fairy tale to help her relax. But just as things get peaceful, a baby suddenly wakes up screaming its lungs out. Total panic mode activates as Lucella realizes the baby made a massive, smelly mess in its diaper. Amelia immediately steps up, offering to do the dirty work since she's used to it. But Lucella refuses to let a child do an adult's job, scooping up the baby and sprinting for the bathroom. While she's struggling to handle the mess, little Edwin quietly walks in, holding a toddler's hand. He silently helps her manage the situation, and she warmly thanks the future male lad. She asks him to help just a little bit longer, promising to make them all delicious hot cocoa as a reward. But by the time she returns to the bedroom with the mugs, Edwin and Amelia are completely knocked out on the bed. She gently pulls the blanket over the two future protagonists, thinking they look like absolute angels. Staring at them, she hopes that one day, her troublemaker nephew Lucian can run through the fields and become their friend instead of their enemy. The next morning, her maids finally return and are completely shook by what they see. Lucella looks like a literal zombie, sporting massive dark circles under her eyes. It turns out she stayed up the entire night, drafting all the legal documents needed to officially take over the orphanage's funding. Before heading out, she makes sure to leave behind a huge basket full of handmade cookies for the kids. Despite the total exhaustion, she feels amazing, knowing she successfully built a strong bond with Edwin and Amelia. As the carriage finally pulls up to her estate, the worn-out auntie wakes up from a quick nap, completely ready to reunite with her clingy little nephew. Lucella finally arrives back at the estate. Lucian immediately rushes her and starts sobbing, throwing a massive tantrum because she promised to be back yesterday. She tries to apologize, but he furiously calls her a liar. Suddenly, a wave of intense dizziness hits her. Exhausted from pulling an all-nighter for the orphanage, she completely collapses like a rag doll right in the driveway. Sometime later, she wakes up in bed to a tearful but relieved Lucian. He throws his arms around her, sobbing that he was terrified she might die because of him. Seeing him this devastated, Lucella realizes that in the original novel, her abandoning him is exactly what triggered his dark villain arc. She looks at him softly and promises she'll stay by his side to help him grow up right. Lucian hugs her tight, promising he'll never act out or hit her again. They seal the deal with a cute pinky promise. Meanwhile, back at the Visnier orphanage, things are drastically different. Thanks to Lucella's takeover, the kids actually have sturdy windows, fun toys, and kind teachers. But little Amelia still feels empty, sadly waiting for the noble lady to return. Edwin approaches, showing her he saved his last cookie to share for when Lucella comes back. Amelia smiles and decides they should just split it now before it goes bad. But just as they do, a fancy carriage rolls up to the gates. It's Lucella back with presents and a huge smile. She tells the orphans she brought a special friend to introduce today. A very shy, nervous Lucian peeks out from behind her dress. Hiding behind his aunt, he's totally overwhelmed by all the unfamiliar kids. But then Amelia steps up with a bright smile to greet him. Lucian is instantly stunned, absolutely captivated by her. His tiny heart starts beating crazy fast. Of course, Edwin immediately gets protective and steps between them. Lucella hands out some fresh cookies for everyone to break the ice. When the orphanage teachers rush out to discuss business with Lucella, Amelia kindly offers to stay outside and watch over Lucian. Lucella happily agrees, thinking nothing could possibly go wrong. An hour later, the three kids are awkwardly sitting on a bench. Lucian pouts, completely jealous of how close Amelia and Edwin are. Trying to be nice, Amelia offers him a piece of her cookie. Lucian scoffs internally at their excitement over a basic snack. Trying to flex, he blurts out, "Are you guys beggars or something?" He totally brags that if they visit his massive house, he'll let them eat all the cookies they want. Edwin just stares at him, realizing this rich kid's social skills are a complete disaster. Amelia glares at him, sternly explaining that calling less fortunate people beggars is incredibly rude. Lucian completely panics, remembering his auntie told him never to hurt others. He bursts into tears, sobbing that he didn't mean to make them feel bad, it's just his first time making friends. Amelia sighs, softening up, and hands him a piece of the cookie. She promises not to snitch to his aunt, but firmly says he needs to fix how he talks. She gives him a gentle but terrifying smile, warning him that if he does it again, she won't let it slide. Lucian happily munches on the cookie Amelia gave him. Lucella finally finishes her meeting with the teachers and rushes out to find her nephew. She's terrified he's already started bullying the original protagonists. But instead of a fight, she finds Amelia literally petting Lucian like a puppy. And this little menace is blushing and barking, totally eating it up. However, sitting alone on the nearby bench, Edwin clutches a teddy bear, looking incredibly sulky. Lucella internally panics, realizing Edwin is getting jealous and their relationship might completely derail. She quickly sits down next to the pouting boy to do some damage control. Edwin mumbles that he didn't do anything to help while Amelia took care of Lucian. Seeing how crushed he is, Lucella smiles and tries to cheer him up. When Edwin sadly claims he's just too timid and ugly for Amelia to like him, Lucella gently pats his head, reassuring him that he's actually super cute. To boost his confidence, she decides to give him a fresh new haircut right then and there. With his messy bangs trimmed, Edwin's stunning red eyes finally show and he looks absolutely adorable. Seeing the attention shift, Lucian instantly gets jealous and demands a haircut too. After that day, Lucella and Lucian start visiting the orphanage all the time. Lucian even packs up his own fancy toys just to show off to Amelia. He's completely fallen for her and doesn't even try to hide it. But back at the estate, the Duke's strict aide, Sir Gilbert, corners Lucella. He condescendingly questions why she's letting the noble young master associate with lowly commoners. Lucella fiercely defends the trips, stating that playing with normal kids gives Lucian much-needed emotional stability. She completely shuts the annoying jerk down and storms off. Back at the orphanage, Lucian proudly displays his massive pile of sweets and toys. And instead of hoarding them, he actually lets Amelia and the other kids pick first. Later, Amelia shows off a beautiful golden music box she saved from her past. As the young girl puts the others to sleep, Lucella watches her and makes a huge decision. She resolves to step in and help Amelia reunite with her real family. But before she can do anything, Amelia pulls her aside for a private chat. The little girl drops a massive bomb. She confesses she is the missing daughter of the Marquis. She admits she hid her identity because she was terrified greedy nobles would exploit her. But after watching Lucella completely wreck that corrupt director, Amelia realized she could finally trust an adult. She gives a heartwarming smile and asks for one single favor. She begs Lucella to help her safely return to her Uncle Claude. Lucella's heart melts and she swears she won't let the child down. As soon as she returns to the mansion, she writes a top-secret letter. A few days later, at the Agris estate, Claude returns from yet another dead-end search for his niece. He's completely exhausted and slowly losing hope. But his aide suddenly hands him a sealed letter that just arrived. Claude reads the sender's name and is totally confused. He stares at the wax seal, wondering why on earth the Lady of the Velamin Duchy is contacting him. Claude reads Lucella's urgent letter about finding his missing niece, Amelia. He immediately drops everything and orders a carriage to the Velamin estate. But the weather is absolutely brutal and his carriage struggles through a massive rainstorm. He's dealt with endless false leads over the last 3 years, but he has a gut feeling this time is real. Back at the Velamin estate, a panicked maid bursts in, warning Lucella about a landslide nearby. She reveals a stranded coachman came begging for help because his master's carriage is buried under the mud. Lucella's blood runs cold as she realizes the trapped noble is Marquis Claude Agris. She rushes out with a rescue team, but the thick mud makes it impossible to dig him out. She starts heavily blaming herself, thinking her letter just doomed Amelia's only remaining family. But she refuses to let the original story get absolutely wrecked like this, ordering the guards to bring a tracker dog. Little Jenny the dog gets right to work sniffing out the buried carriage. Lucella literally grabs a shovel herself, knowing every single second counts. Suddenly, the Duke's snooty aide, Sir Gillian, shows up and yells at her to stop this unladylike behavior. He claims she's tarnishing the family name, but Lucella completely roasts him for caring about manners when a life is on the line. She totally shuts him down, telling him to help or get out of her way. The team finally hits the carriage door and forces it open. They pull Claude out, he's battered and bleeding but alive. Lucella introduces herself, and the desperate Marquis immediately begs to be taken to Amelia. But Lucella firmly stops him, pointing out that seeing him covered in blood would completely traumatize the little girl who already lost her parents in a crash. Claude realizes she's right and agrees to get treated at the ducal house first. With the crisis finally over, the adrenaline leaves Lucella's body and the world starts spinning. She completely passes out from the freezing rain, collapsing right into Claude's arms like a ragdoll. Sometime later, she wakes up in her warm bed as her maid happily reports that the Marquis is safe. Suddenly, Lucien bursts into the room, sobbing his eyes out. He throws himself at her, terrified that she was actually going to die this time. As she comforts him, the door opens again, and in walks Claude, all bandaged up and looking stupidly handsome. Lucella's face turns bright red, completely caught off guard by his insane visuals. Lucien immediately glares at them, getting super jealous of his aunt blushing over another man. Just then, Amelia arrives, looking completely overjoyed. The story flashes back to a few hours ago when Amelia nervously stood outside Claude's guest room. She was terrified her uncle wouldn't even recognize her after 3 long years. But the second Claude saw her, he recognized his precious niece immediately. They shared a massive, tearful hug, finally reunited after so long. Back in the present, Claude sincerely thanks Lucella for bringing his only blood relative back to him. But then he does something wild. He hands Amelia his crutches and slowly lowers himself onto one knee. He gently takes Lucella's hand and swears an official oath upon his entire marquisate. He promises to dedicate the rest of his life entirely to her, no cap. Lucella completely panics, realizing this massive oath of honor basically gives her full authority over his family. Lucella is absolutely panicking, completely refusing the Marquis's sudden oath of honor. But his niece, Amelia, insists, pointing out that Lucella literally saved her uncle's life and the entire Agris bloodline. The Marquis gently offers his bandaged hand, making it clear he has zero intention of taking back his vow. He flashes a warm smile, begging her to just accept it. Internally, Lucella is losing her mind, terrified that she just accidentally fast-tracked a deadly plotline by reuniting these two. Suddenly, her nephew Lucien aggressively jumps between them, glaring daggers at the Marquis. He completely goes off, yelling at the Marquis for spreading his nasty germs to his sick aunt. Without missing a beat, the protective little guy drags Lucella away to go wash her hands. He forces her to scrub at the sink, scolding her like an overprotective parent. Lucella stares at her reflection, mortified that she just received a grand aristocratic oath looking like a total mess. Leaving them to their chaotic hand-washing, the Marquis and Amelia head back to their room. Along the way, they overhear the estate maids totally trash-talking Lucella, calling her a freeloader who just wants the Marquis's attention. Safely in their room, Amelia casually points out how cute the Marquis thought Lucella's flustered reaction was. Knowing her uncle wants to repay her, the clever little girl smirks, claiming she has the perfect idea. She drops an absolute bomb: he should just marry Lucella. The Marquis turns completely red, stammering in shock at the wild suggestion. Amelia gets serious, explaining how the people in this house clearly treat Lucella poorly. If he marries her, he can take her away and give her the life of luxury she actually deserves. Plus, Amelia totally calls him out, noticing that he was definitely staring at Lucella with some serious hard eyes. Defeated by a child's logic, the Marquis blushes hard and admits she's right. He remembers the exact moment he first laid eyes on Lucella. Realizing that his intense desire to protect her isn't just basic gratitude, the man is completely whipped. Slapping his knee in determination, he makes up his mind to win her over. Stepping up as his personal dating coach, Amelia gives him his first lesson: smoothly invite her for tea. The Marquis literally takes notes like a panic student. Fast forward 1 week, and the Marquis is still crashing at the Duke's estate, using his minor injury as an excuse. Following Amelia's advice, he awkwardly tries to bump into Lucella naturally. But every single time, she speedwalks away, dodging him like an absolute pro. Finally cornering her on the balcony, he shoots his shot, but she stammers out an excuse about being way too busy. Seeing him look a little crushed, Lucella quickly pivots, asking if he'd go somewhere with her instead. Soon, they're riding in a carriage, having a surprisingly pleasant chat about the kids. When they arrive, they watch Amelia happily playing, and Lucella realizes her hard work is paying off. Even Lucien seems way more relaxed and sleepy around the Marquis now. Looking at the kids, Lucella internally schemes, hoping she can easily erase Lucien's tragic future. She watches Lucien and Edwin eating together, hoping they can grow up as close brothers. Later, gathering the kids around, Lucella officially introduces the Marquis to everyone. She formally presents Claude, with Amelia proudly standing by his side. When the kids realize Amelia is leaving with her uncle, they are absolutely heartbroken. Amelia gently tries to comfort Edwin, promising she'll come back to visit often. But Edwin completely breaks down, crying as he runs up to them. Not wanting to cause a scene, Lucella tells Amelia to wait with Claude while she comforts the crying boy. Meanwhile, Lucien suddenly realizes his aunt is missing. He wanders out into the halls, quietly searching for her. He eventually finds her inside a bedroom, gently hugging and comforting Edwin. She praises Edwin for being a good boy, completely unaware that Lucien is watching. Hearing her baby another kid, Lucien freezes in the doorway, his eyes wide with betrayal. Heartbroken, he backs away and runs down the hall, trembling with jealousy. The Marquis catches the crying boy in the hallway, crouching down to ask what's wrong. But when Claude tries to treat him like a kid, Lucien completely snaps. Lucella arrives just in time to hear Lucien scream that he's not a little kid anymore. She gasps, completely caught off guard by his sudden outburst. Tears streaming down his face, Lucien screams that he hates her, accusing her of only doting on Edwin. Lucella is left absolutely stunned, completely blindsided by the accusation. When she tries to reach out, he violently smacks her hand away, shouting his hatred one last time before running off. Left standing in the dark hallway, guilt crashes over Lucella as she realizes this is all her fault. She realizes she was so obsessed with changing the plot that she completely neglected her own nephew's feelings. Burying her face in her hands, she feels completely torn between helping Edwin and hurting Lucien. Seeing her distress, the Marquis steps up, gently reassuring her that Edwin is safe with the other children. He flashes a comforting smile, telling her not to worry too much about Lucien's emotional explosion. Lucella is still extremely hesitant, worried that her stubborn nephew won't ever forgive her. But Claude warmly reminds her that Lucien is a sweet kid who clearly just loves his aunt way too much to share her. As they look out into the night sky, the Marquis assures her that everything will work out just fine. The Marquis quietly sneaks into Lucella's room to check on her condition, and finds little Lucien crashed out right beside her, having stayed by her side to take care of her all night long. The Marquis warmly points out that this kind of fierce devotion doesn't just happen overnight. He gently tells Lucella that this proves she's finally shown the boy what it truly means to be loved. Hearing this, Lucella blushes hard, completely touched by his words. She thinks back to how Lucien acts like a terrified statue around his cold, biological father, but absolutely lights up and acts like a normal, happy kid around her and the maids. Hugging the sleeping boy tight, she realizes his outburst earlier wasn't hatred, it was just desperate, childish jealousy. Fired up, she pumps her fists, determined to tell Lucien exactly how much she loves him. The Marquis smiles, totally cheering her on. Meanwhile, Lucien is hiding in a dark room, hugging his knees and crying his eyes out. He thinks back to Lucella babying Edwin, wondering if she's going to adopt him instead because he's more mature. The poor kid is absolutely spiraling, terrified that his aunt is going to give up on him just like his dad did. He buries his face in his arms, weeping, until a shadow suddenly looms over him. Amelia pops up out of nowhere, totally startling the crying boy. She tells him he needs to come back right now because everyone, especially his aunt, is frantically looking for him. When Lucien pouts, Amelia calls him a dummy and flat-out tells him that Lucella obviously loves him the most. But Lucien furiously denies it, claiming she dotes on Edwin way more. Amelia sighs and reminds him of the time they first met, when she completely misunderstood him offering her cookies. She flashes a sweet smile, suggesting that maybe this is the exact same kind of silly misunderstanding. She tells him to stop overthinking and just remember how his aunt usually treats him. Lucien's eyes widen as he remembers accidentally shattering a teacup a few days ago. Instead of getting mad, Lucella had immediately pulled him into a frantic, loving hug just to make sure he wasn't scratched. It finally clicks for him. He realizes she was only paying extra attention to Edwin because Edwin is neglected and unloved just like him. Amelia adds that since she's leaving the estate soon, Lucella probably just wanted to give them a proper chance to say goodbye. Completely won over, Lucien blushes hard and asks if he can start calling her Leah since they're close friends now. Amelia smirks, agreeing to the nickname only if he promises to go make up with his aunt. He instantly gets imaginary puppy dog ears and a wagging tail, excitedly promising to do it. Cut back to Lucella, who is frantically searching the empty halls for her nephew. Suddenly, Lucien comes flying out of nowhere and tackles her in a massive, tearful hug. Watching from the doorway, Amelia and the Marquis peek in on the heartwarming reunion. Lucien looks up at her with big, shiny eyes, apologizing for yelling and admitting he didn't mean a word of it. The two completely make up, wrapping up the whole dramatic misunderstanding perfectly. Leaning in, the Marquis whispers to Amelia, praising her for giving him the exact right advice to help the two reconcile. 1 week later, the group arrives at Duke Bellarmine's massive estate. The Marquis steps in like a total dad, fixing Lucien's crooked bow tie and hyping him up to see his father. But Lucien instantly stiffens up, looking completely terrified at the mention of his dad. Amelia watches this, realizing that her uncle is completely clueless about how scary the Duke actually is to Lucien. Right on cue, a fancy carriage rolls up to the front steps. Everyone lines up in pure silence as the intimidating Duke finally steps out. Lucien works up all his courage, nervously calling out to his father. But the Duke completely blanks him, walking right past his own son to shake hands with the Marquis instead. The Marquis then introduces Amelia to the Duke. The Duke actually cracks a warm smile, greeting the little girl with pure kindness. Watching his dad act so warmly to a total stranger while ignoring him like a ghost, Lucien clutches the curtains, absolutely crushed. Later, the adults sit down for some fancy tea in the drawing room. The Marquis sips his tea, internally annoyed that the Duke still hasn't said a single word about Lucien. He stares at a family portrait, baffled at how a father could so blatantly ignore his sole heir. Instead, the Duke spends the whole time praising Lucella for saving Amelia and fixing up the orphanage. The Marquis really wants to snap and tell him to treat his son better, but decides it's not his place to interfere, awkwardly excusing himself for the day. Left alone, the Duke picks up an official report from his desk. The documents completely verify that Lucella has been working hard to fix the territory's issues. He realizes he can't just ignore her anymore and decides it's time to summon her for a serious talk. The next morning, a lavish breakfast is laid out in the massive dining hall. To everyone's shock, the Duke, who usually eats alone, actually comes out to join them. But as Amelia sits there drinking her milk, she realizes something is completely wrong. The Marquis is missing. At breakfast, Amelia casually mentions that her uncle isn't there because he's sick in bed. But the morning takes a wild turn when the usually cold Duke starts praising Lucella in front of everyone for busting the corrupt orphanage director and saving Amelia. He tells her she's done excellent work and actually offers her a reward. Sensing a golden opportunity, Lucella shoots her shot and asks to invite the orphanage kids over today for a farewell party for Amelia. Surprisingly, the strict Duke agrees without hesitation, ordering his butler to prep a carriage immediately. Figuring the Marquis must have talked the Duke into being so nice, Lucella grabs a tea tray and heads to his room to thank him. She pushes the door open with a bright, innocent smile, only to freeze when she finds the Marquis standing there completely shirtless. Her face turns beet red as her eyes lock onto his absolute unit of a physique. After awkwardly helping him tie his bandages, she leans in and instinctively presses her forehead against his to check his temperature. Realizing what she just did, she completely short-circuits and jumps back in a full-blown panic. Unbothered, the Marquis just smiles warmly and asks if she can stay by his side until he falls asleep. Of course she agrees, but sitting in the quiet room, she accidentally dozes off too. She jolts awake hours later, glancing at the clock and realizing she slept way too long. Suddenly, a panicked maid bursts through the door, screaming that something terrible has happened. Turns out, the kids started a game of hide-and-seek while she was asleep. And now Edwin is completely missing. To make matters worse, the Duke suddenly has to leave for the palace, and his strict aide orders the commoner kids to be kicked out immediately. Knowing this is her absolute last chance to make the Duke and Edwin meet, Lucella scrambles to find the boy before the Duke leaves. Meanwhile, Edwin is hiding in a dark corner, feeling totally left out after seeing Lucien and Amelia bonding like a real family. He slumps against the wall, hiding away out of pure sadness and isolation. Suddenly, he hears footsteps approaching his hiding spot inside a massive wardrobe. The door handle clicks and he cowers in absolute fear. The doors swing open, revealing Lucien, who finally found him. Lucien crosses his arms, scolding him for breaking the rules and hiding down on the forbidden first floor. But Edwin just bursts into tears, sobbing that the game is over and he doesn't want to go back to the desolate orphanage. Heartbroken, the little guy cries out that he just wishes he had a family who loved him too. Desperate, Edwin begs Lucien to let him live here with them. Lucien gets gloomy, explaining that his own father pretends he doesn't even exist, so having a family isn't all that great. Still, seeing Edwin so desperate, Lucien's eyes light up with an idea. He tells Edwin that if he really wants to stay, he has to get permission directly from the scariest person in the house, the Duke. Knowing the Duke is leaving soon, the two boys sprint down the hall to catch him in time. But they literally bump right into the terrifying Duke, who glares down at them, furious that Lucien is running around his private quarters. Lucien shrinks back in pure terror, but Edwin bravely steps forward to explain that it was an accident. The moment the Duke looks down, his eyes widen in absolute shock. He stares at the boys, striking red eyes and silver hair, instantly realizing who this child looks like. He demands to know the boy's mother's name, and Edwin innocently answers Iris. Hearing that name, the intimidating Duke completely crumbles to his knees, grabbing the boy's shoulders. He stares at Edwin in pure disbelief, confirming out loud that he is the son of Iris. The Duke stares lovingly at the boy, crying out, "I've always longed for you, my beloved son," leaving Lucien absolutely shattered in the background. Moments later, Lucella rushes down the hall, spotting Lucien walking out of his father's office looking completely dead inside. Lucella rushes over, finding Lucien standing completely frozen in the hallway. He throws his arms around her, trembling as he cries that his father is acting like a completely different person. He just watched his famously cold dad kneel down and warmly embrace Edwin. Looking down, Lucien admits he knows he should be smiling for his friend. But he clutches his chest, heartbroken, wondering if he's a bad kid for feeling so violently jealous. Lucella immediately pulls him into a tight hug, assuring him he has a wonderfully kind heart. She holds him as he sobs, fiercely promising to stay by his side and protect him forever. Meanwhile, the Duke brings Edwin straight into the Grand Hall and officially announces to the entire mansion that Edwin is his long-lost biological son. Immediately, the toxic estate maids start whispering. They rudely debate whether they should side with the new perfect heir or the ignored Lucien. Lucella overhears this absolute trash talk from around the corner. She tightly grips the curtain, furious and terrified that this environment will completely wreck Lucien's mental state. Later at bedtime, after reading a story, Lucien asks a heavy question. Hugging his teddy bear, he asks if he and Edwin are actually biological brothers. But before she can explain political marriages, the little guy smiles, declaring that since family is a good thing, he accepts it. He admits he's still super envious of his dad's attention, but vows to just work twice as hard to be as kind as Edwin. Absolutely melted by his maturity, Lucella crushes him in a massive hug, calling him her little chickpea while he loudly protests. The next day, Emilia steps up as the ultimate wingman, telling her Uncle Claude to score some points with Lucella since she's stressed. She suggests a romantic picnic, and Claude is totally on board. But right now, Lucella is slumped on the floor, deeply worried if these sweet kids can survive in this toxic household. The Duke suddenly summons her, wanting to express his gratitude. He states that if there is absolutely anything she desires, he will grant it, no questions asked. Staring down this selfish man, Lucella demands only one thing. She tells him point-blank to stop discriminating and treat Lucien just as preciously as he treats Edwin. The Duke's eyes narrow in confusion. He just sits there in complete heavy silence, not giving her a single word of agreement. Annoyed, she walks out. Shaking it off, she goes to check on Edwin, who comes running up to her with a huge smile. He bows deeply, sincerely thanking her. With happy tears in his eyes, he admits he never would have met his real father if it weren't for her and Lucien. Seeing the two boys happily playing with toys, Lucella breathes a sigh of relief. But peeking from the shadows, a sinister-looking maid glares at them, clearly plotting to drive a wedge between the brothers. Luckily, Claude and Emilia show up, totally cutting the tension. Flashing his incredibly handsome smile, Claude smoothly asks Lucella to join him for a picnic. Out on the grass, Emilia proudly presents a giant sludgy pile of dirt, calling it her special mud cake. Sweating nervously, Edwin politely forces a smile and pretends it looks delicious. The adults relax, happy to see the kids getting along so well. When Lucella asks about his health, Claude confidently brags about his insane nightly stamina. Lucella immediately blushes, her mind flashing right back to his chiseled six-pack from the other day. Changing the subject, Claude expresses his worry over how blatantly the Duke neglects Lucien. But Lucella smiles confidently, refusing to abandon her nephew just because things got complicated. Suddenly, a servant walks up, interrupting the chill vibes to announce the Duke is looking for Edwin. Edwin happily waves goodbye, completely unaware of what's coming. He follows the aide down the winding paths back to the massive estate. As they walk, the maids continue their nasty gossiping, pitying Lucien now that the perfect son has arrived. Edwin enters the office, only to find it filled with intimidating, shadowy nobles who immediately start judging him. Terrified by the creepy adults evaluating his sharp eyes, the poor kid clutches his shirt, shaking like a leaf. Finally noticing his son's panic, the Duke steps forward and coldly commands the nobles to step outside. The Duke immediately dismisses the snobby nobles, telling them to come back and greet Edwin properly later. Once they're alone, the Duke's cold demeanor completely drops, and he asks Edwin if anyone has been giving him a hard time. Edwin happily shakes his head, saying everyone treats him great, especially Lucella and Lucien. The Duke narrows his eyes suspiciously, asking if Lucella forced him to say that. Edwin genuinely praises them both, but admits he feels way more stifled and uncomfortable around his actual father. Not wanting his son to suffer, the Duke offers him a massive out. Would you like to just move to the capital with me? Edwin's eyes widen at the idea, but when the Duke clarifies that Lucella and Lucien won't be coming with them, the boy hesitates. Clenching his tiny fists, Edwin bravely declines the offer, stating he'd rather stay here a little longer. He excitedly explains that he wants to stay because his new big sister Lucella is here. Plus, he really wants to spend more time bonding with Lucien and Emilia now that they're a real family. Hearing this pure-hearted reasoning, the Duke softens and totally respects his son's decision. Meanwhile, the Marquis and Lucella are walking through the hall when the Marquis mentions he just received an urgent letter from the Imperial Palace. Just then, a knight bursts into the hall, loudly saluting Commander Claude. He hands over a highly decorated, fancy chest sent directly from His Majesty. The moment Claude opens it, Lucella slaps a hand over her nose, gagging at a sudden, terrible stench. The knight and the Marquis both look at her completely confused, swearing they don't smell absolutely anything. Inside the box sits a massive, glowing pink crystal, a literal monster's core. Lucella gasps, immediately recognizing the vile smell as pure demonic energy. The Marquis is completely stunned, wondering how a sheltered noble lady could possibly know about demonic energy. He reveals that he's been suppressing monsters for 5 years, and literally no one has ever been able to physically smell a mana crystal before. Lucella sweats bullets, desperately trying to cover up her slip by lying that she just read about it in a book once. Taking her seriously, the Marquis officially introduces himself as the Knight Commander of the Imperial Monster Suppression Force. He explains that these high-ranking cores are packed with mana so potent it acts like a lethal poison. He gently places the cursed crystal into her bare hand, assuring her it's completely safe in its solid form. He then gives her a crazy instruction: channel her power into it with the intent to purify the mana. She closes her eyes and concentrates as hard as she can, but absolutely nothing happens. The two of them just sit there looking incredibly awkward. The Marquis sighs, apologizing for testing her, admitting he thought she might secretly be a legendary purifier. He explains that in ancient legends, some people possessed a divine power so insanely strong it could completely instantly purify demonic energy. Their impromptu lore lesson is cut short when the Duke's aide suddenly interrupts, calling for Lucella. Inside the office, the Duke cuts straight to the chase, announcing he's returning to the capital soon. He casually drops a massive bomb. He's leaving Edwin behind and expects Lucella to take full responsibility for him. He admits that Edwin trusts her and Lucien completely and begged to stay with them. To sweeten the deal, the Duke slaps a giant bag of gold on the desk and offers her a legendary vow ring, a symbol of absolute power among his vassals. But Lucella glares at him, absolutely disgusted that he thinks he can just buy her off while continuing to neglect Lucien. She stands tall and flat-out refuses his ridiculous offer. She fiercely declares that she didn't raise Lucien for money, and she absolutely won't treat Edwin like a business transaction either. The Duke is stunned, but Lucella presses on, explaining that she already had a deep, heartbreaking talk with Lucien. She calls out the Duke's terrible parenting, reminding him that Lucien is only 6 years old and is deeply conflicted right now. She bluntly tells the Duke that he is the one who needs to step up and fill the void in Lucien's heart, not her. Finally realizing how badly he messed up, the Duke admits he was completely thoughtless and promises to assign separate staff to protect Edwin. He still forces her to take the gold and the ring, insisting it's just a gift for her hard work. Walking out, Lucella smirks, realizing this vow ring is the ultimate trump card to keep the toxic vassals in check. She starts scheming, realizing she can use this power to make Lucien the official successor and give everyone a perfect happy ending. Feeling confident, she pops over to Edwin's room to check on him. She finds the poor kid drowning in a massive, overly complicated assignment given by a strict new tutor. She immediately notices that Edwin is wearing completely shabby, ill-fitting clothes. She realizes that the cruel staff is intentionally neglecting Edwin, making him wear whatever scraps they hand him while drowning him in impossible work. Knowing she has to get him out of there, she asks if he's ever been out to the city before. She promises to take him out early tomorrow morning to explore and buy some proper clothes. But as the scene fades, a dark narration warns that she had absolutely no idea that tomorrow's trip would completely destroy their futures forever.